Hi, my name is Lindsay, and I'm the Children's Church Director here for the Mile High Vineyard. There's that saying that says, kids don't care until they know that you care. And I fully believe that relationships are a vital part to our discipleship process here in Kid Venture. And as a small group leader, you have a great opportunity to build a strong relationship with the kids in your group. So this training is actually going to be about how to have effective conversations with kids and preschoolers. Now, your first thought may be, wait, we don't do small groups. That's okay. The tips and techniques talked about in here, you can use whether you're in a small group setting, whether you're playing a game or doing a craft or activity with the kids. So these are tools that you can use to build a relationship with kids no matter where you're at. No matter where you're at, and help to gain the trust needed to point the kids to Jesus. So the first tip or the first trick that I'm going to tell you about happens way before a Sunday, and that is you have to come in prepared. We give you access to the curriculum ahead of time through Planning Center, but you need to read through hey, what are we talking about? Looking at the different activities, and a great thing is our curriculum says here's questions to ask the kids at this time, but this is a great opportunity for you to figure out hey, are these questions appropriate for my group? Will the kids in my class understand these questions, or do I need to change it up? Or do I even understand this question? So by coming in ahead of time, having looked at the curriculum, what's happening is it gives you the great opportunity to think about your kids and how they're going to receive the questions that are being asked at the time. And it gives you the opportunity to think ahead of time about how to change that up if you feel like it. And then also to pray for your group. So, even to go in before Sunday, asking, for the Spirit's presence to be with you, to speak to you, to give you eyes to see your kids, and then also to soften their hearts to hear what is going to be taught. Is probably going to be the best thing you ever will be able to do for your kids. The second tip that I want to talk to you about is about connecting with the kids, right? So this is, this is okay, now we're into Sunday mornings, right? So you're going to connect with the kids, and you're going to help the kids connect with others, right? So this is do the kids know that I care about them? So this is but this can happen even before you get to small group time, right? So this should be happening actually before then. So, from the moment the first child walks into your classroom on a Sunday morning is whatever preparation needed to happen should be done. There shouldn't be any more fiddling with things, and we need to be focused on the kids. So if they're playing dominoes, sit with a group of kids playing dominoes and just hear what they're talking about, or ask them questions about their building or about their day, about school, or whatever it is that you want to talk to them about, their favorite TV show or whatever. This is also great. The welcome centers are great. If there's a new kid, you get to introduce yourself to them. And again, find out hey, what school do you go to? What grade are you in? Oh, look, we have Legos. Do you like to build? Oh, great. Why don't you come? Let's join these kids that play Legos. And you get to help introduce them and connect the kids together. Just another resource we have here for you guys is we have these thank you for coming to Kid Venture postcards. So if there's a kid that you feel is highlighted to you throughout the service, is you can write a little postcard to them and hand them to your Sunday captain, and we'll get them mailed to you throughout the week, as long as we have the mailing address for the family, so that you can connect with your kids outside of Sunday. But these are just some things you can do, again, like I said, before you even get to small group, to get the kids kind of warmed up, they get to know you, they get to see you having fun. But then also during small group, even, it's okay, small group, we got to get through all this stuff in this short amount of time. Take a minute and do a quick little icebreaker with the kids, right? So happy, sad, favorite color, you could tie it to the lesson, favorite bug, if it's about the plagues or whatever. So it's just an opportunity to give the kids to kind of first of all, just relax within the group and talk about themselves. And it's oh, I like that too. And it just gives them a chance to connect, because when they feel connected, they'll probably be willing to take a little bit more risk within your group. So now that you've connected with the kids, and we're having fun over dominoes and stuff like that, I think the next thing is you need to know your kids, right? And I know it's hard if you don't serve every Sunday, but you need to know what's going on for your kids. Now, in our small group binders, there are notebooks that I put in there that you can put prayer requests down. So if at any point in the morning you hear a kid talking about oh, my mom is sick or this or that, write that prayer request down in the binder. And then before service, or even as you hop in a small group, you can look at it real quick and be hey, Johnny, you were praying about this last week. Can you give us an update on how that's going for you? That lets me, how does it make you feel when somebody connects with you a few days later after you shared a prayer request? It makes you feel cared for and seen and important, right? And so what a great opportunity we have to do that for our kids. Another thing to do is, are there things in your room that are distracting to the kids, right? So, in Arvada, we have tables out that we put our prep stuff on. I like making sure those things are cleared off because the kids are always curious about what's on the table. They're always wanting to fidget or play with it or mess it up or anything like that. And so I think it's just important to remove anything and everything that could be distracting to the kids. And if you can catch it ahead of time, that's great. If it's something that they brought from home, it's like, hey, just keep that in your pocket. I don't want to see that. That's a little distracting to the group, and things like that. But just go ahead and get rid of distractions because if they're distracted, you're not going to be able to connect with them. Another thing you can do is engage with the kids, right? So during the large group time, if there's like, if you're playing a game, play the game with the kids, right? So don't just stand back and be like, whatever, unless like the large group needs your leader needs your help or whatever. But get in there with the kids, get messy with them. If it's like a pie in the face, then get a pie in your face because kids are going to laugh at that and they're going to remember that. And having that memory of like, hey, remember when we did that together? Oh my gosh, that was so awesome, wasn't it? That just helps to build a connection with the kids and trust in kids' eyes. So be willing to get in there and to laugh with the kids and have fun with your kids on a Sunday during large group time or other parts of the morning. And then another thing is you may need to revamp whatever the classroom expectations are for your group. So, we have our list of Kid Venture rules, but, you may be like, hey, listen, like, one of our rules is we don't talk. If somebody else is speaking, we listen, right? So you may want to create like a talking stick for your group where you're like, hey, it's like take a old paint stick or something and decorate it and be like, hey, if you're holding this, you're the one talking. And then it's like if somebody starts talking, like, hey, remember our rules where we don't talk. If somebody's holding that, you can get, whatever. So just think about like just even revisiting real quick the expectations, or if you need to revamp them for your group a little bit, you can do that as well. So now that you've started building some trust and some foundations with the kids and connecting them, now you can start engaging them in the truth about Jesus. And so when we think about this, the first thing you want to actually think about, and it's very hard for me because it's like, oh, I'm the teacher, I'm the small group leader, I need to know everything, is actually I need to talk less and listen more. So when I ask a question, am I focused on the child? Am I looking at them? Am I like focusing on what they have to say instead of trying to think, oh, how am I gonna like respond to that question? Or like, are they saying this right? Am I gonna correct them? What's the real thing to say here? How do I do? Like none of that. Like no, just listen to what the kids have to say because chances are they're getting it on their own. And then but then I can come back and say, hey, it sounded like you said this. Is this correct? And that gives them the chance to say yes or no, because the reality is our kids know their thoughts and emotions, right? And so we're just giving them the opportunity to make sure that they feel heard and understood. Even preschoolers, my daughter's 3 years old, and one day I forget what it was about, but she's like throwing a fit about something. And I was like, oh my gosh, Abby, it sounds like you're so mad about something. And she goes, no, 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 Mom, I'm not mad. I'm frustrated and I'm sad. And so, she always surprises me as a 3-year-old, just like how self-aware she is about her emotions. And she's like she has a thought and opinion about most things, right? And most of her kids do if we just take the time to let them speak. And so if I'm speaking less, that gives them the opportunity to talk more. And as we're talking to them about Jesus, because they're talking about it, they're going to start to own it and be like, wait, this is what I really think and why. Like, okay, that's really cool. That's really what we want, right? And so that actually kind of ties into our next point, and that is think with the end in mind. What is the destination? Now, you may think, oh, yeah, our curriculum, they give us the big idea, and that's the destination. No, that's close to the destination. That gets us on the way to the destination. But the destination isn't just, okay, what's the big idea? So, like, one week the kids are like, Jesus is our superhero. That's great. Jesus is our superhero. But how is Jesus a superhero for you? And so that is our destination. Our destination isn't just, okay, what is the big idea and can you repeat it, right? But it's what is it we want you to know about Jesus, and what does that look like for you personally? Because what that looks like for you is going to be different than what that looks like for him. And we want you to know what that means for you. So it's how do we take the big idea and how does it apply to the child? That is our destination. But with that, you may have to control less and lead more. So that kind of ties in with our talk less, listen more. But it's okay if you don't know the answer, right? So if a kid wants to go down a rabbit trail or take a little detour, give them that freedom for a little bit to do that. And if you think it can eventually wrap around to whatever the big idea or whatever that destination is that we're trying to get the kid to, that's fine. Tie that in. Because you know what? If it's something that's coming out of them, it's going to be more effective if you can tie it into that and then instead of trying to contrive it to be something else. Or it may just be like something like, hey, like this kid's not listening, and then he busts out and he goes down this detour, and only to find out that his mom's really sick. What a great opportunity do you have to pray for this kid and like teach the other kids, hey, how do we care for a friend who's like hurting right now? And so if we control less and just lead more, we're able to be more open to what the Holy Spirit's doing in our kids instead of feeling like we always have to like this, and this, and this. The great thing about our curriculum, you guys, is it's a guide, right? So I always tell my teens, like, hey, listen, if you don't get to everything, that's okay. I actually don't expect you to get to everything. If you get to everything, I'm actually going to be very surprised because that means you were just going activity, 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 and not really thinking about the kids and like giving them a chance to engage with what's happening and with what the Lord's doing. So another thing to do is learning how to ask great questions of our kids, right? So with kids, just be aware, like the great thing, again, our curriculum gives you like small group guides that they give you some questions. So you can always go to those if you're like, I'm not so sure how to ask questions that the kids will understand. That's great. Our curriculum gives you that. They help you figure it out. But if you're like, hey, I feel like I want to venture outside of our curriculum, that's great. Just a few things. Don't ask yes or no questions because those really don't create conversation, right? It's just, is the sky yellow? Yes. There's not much hold to it, but it's like, hey, why do you think God made the sun yellow? Or like, what do you think makes the sun? So like that's like gets the kids thinking in different ways instead of just being a straight yes or no. Or it's like, hey, like how does it make you feel to know that Jesus is your superhero? So just being able to ask questions that are a little bit more open-ended, they get the kids thinking about like, hey, how does this apply to my experience? Or what do I think or what do I feel about this? Those are always going to be great questions to ask them. And so just like I've mentioned before, you guys, preschoolers, by the way, are also able to answer these types of questions. Now, you may have to keep them shorter and don't expect these super long responses out of them, but they are capable of expressing themselves and what they think and why. Trust me, I'm well aware of that with my daughter. It just may happen. They may need to be a little bit more active or engaged in like an activity while you're talking to them, right? So you're not going to be able to sit them down and be like, "Hey, Abby, tell me about your deepest darkest thoughts." Like, no, like, hey, but while she's sitting at the table coloring, you could say, "Hey, Abby, like, what do you think about Jesus being your superhero? Like, what do you think a superhero does? What does it look like to be a superhero?" Now she's coloring her picture of her superhero. She'll be able to say, I think they can do this or that. And, it's like, well, what makes Jesus a superhero? So that you can definitely engage preschoolers in these questions. But it just sometimes might help them because of their age if they're absorbed in an activity while they're doing that. Another thing during small group time is silence is okay. And I know it's hard sometimes, even with adults. It's like silence, like, oh, what does this mean? But if you're willing to pause and reflect, it gives you the opportunity to look at your group and you can kind of even just see on their faces, like, are they looking at you like, what is he talking about? Or are they like, like you could just tell they're thinking about what you're saying. Because if they're thinking about, that's okay if you just want to pause for a few seconds and let them think. Because somebody will eventually speak up and say, oh, this is what I think about that, right? But if they have that like confused look on their face, then you can be like, hey guys, like you look a little confused. Let me rephrase the question for you. So don't feel the need to rush in and fill every single second of silence. Like it's okay to sit in the silence for for a minute or two if you feel like your kids just really need the space to think about what is going on. Another thing is, kids may sometimes they like to be, I don't know, they just like to drop the truth bomb or they just like to shock people. And so the one thing is that is you want to underreact. You want to make your small group a place where anything can be shared. I'll never forget one time I was in the elementary room and we were doing this activity where it's like we were painting, like we did tape like across and out of tape, and then they were supposed to paint around it colors, and I forget what the connection was to that, but I remember there's one girl who was like painting it all black, and she's like, I do this because I love the devil or something like that. And I just, in that moment, I was just like, oh, okay. Like, I totally underreacted. And, my natural inclination was like, no, like, I wanted to, like, see it because she's older, so I could be like, this is why that's wrong. And da, but, like, no, like, I just totally underreacted. And I didn't try to make her feel bad. I didn't ask her why or, like, try to judge her or anything like that. And she is, like, the sweetest little girl. Like, we have seen such amazing change in her. And I just hope that by me underreacting to her trying to, like, shock me a little bit just made her realize just what a safe place I am for her to, like, honestly come with whatever she thinks, come with whatever doubts she has about Jesus, to where she can explore them and realize, like, man, like, loving Jesus is messy. So just, again, to underreact. And another great tip here is try to limit the number of why questions, because sometimes that can come across as like judging. So it's like, well, why do you believe that, instead of what makes you believe that, right? So it just, it's a different way. So why it can sometimes come across as a little judgmental. So just or right versus wrong. So it's like, how does that make you feel? Or instead of why do you feel that way? It's like, how does that make you feel? What do you think God would say? Um, Instead of feeling like they have to be right or wrong about something. Again, we've talked about this before. If you're prepared, you may need to improvise on the question, and that's totally okay. If you feel like the Spirit's leading you in a different direction, like that's okay too. Um, if an open-ended question seems hard, right? So you ask a question, it's why, like, why do you think God created the universe? I know, say that's your question, right? And the kids are like, oh, you may be like, okay, let's do multiple choice, right? Hey, did God create the universe because he loves us, because of this, or that? Like, you could just, like, you turn it into a multiple choice question if you get that, like, confused look on the kid's face. But be willing to improvise by changing the question. But that's where if you're prepared, this is where that if you're prepared ahead of time, you're aware of like, hey, what are we trying to get at? So if I need to improvise, I can kind of do it a little bit easier on the fly. And then again, we talked about this already before, but be willing to follow rabbit trails. Now you may need to cut them up. Like, okay, does this relate to what we're talking about? No. Okay, we're gonna end it there because we're not gonna spend 5 minutes talking about somebody's pet rabbit. But we're like, if you feel like you can make a connection out of what we're talking about, that's okay to do a little bit of a rabbit trail. But the other thing is go with your gut. Like, listen, like it's okay to try something that you think will work. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, that's okay too. Failure isn't getting something wrong. Failure is not doing what we feel like the Lord is like. To me, I feel like failure is like when we hold ourselves back from what we feel like the Lord wants us to do because we feel like we're going to get it wrong. And so I really want to, challenge you as you guys get to know your group. Like you can risk with them because that just shows them like, hey, like we have to risk things for the Lord. And so I'm willing to risk like getting a question wrong or confusing you guys or something like that. Like I'm willing to risk trying this because I feel like this may be what the Lord wants me to do in this moment. Like I said, it may go over really well. I mean, I've had bombs. Like I've done something and the kids are like, what is this? Or like, I don't get what you're talking about. And that's okay. You just live and learn. That's how you learn some things, right? Is by willing to try things. But we never consider that a failure. That's just a great learning point. And then last but not least, so we're prepared, we're connecting with the kids, we're knowing our kids, we're engaging them in the truth about Jesus. And last but not least, now we get to actually help our kids move towards Jesus, right? So this kind of goes back to the what's our destination in mind. So it's not just, hey, can we recite the big idea? But it's like, how does that apply to me? And so, so it's like, okay, well, how does that apply to me? And what can I do about that, right? So it's like, now what? Now what? So it's like, yes, Jesus is my superhero. But that means I love our curriculum, so it's like, we start off like, hey, because Jesus is our superhero and da 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 da. And now it's like, hey, heroes help others. So it's like, we want to give our kids like, what's the next step? What's like a little challenge you can do with the kids? Like, can you create like a fun little challenge and then maybe let like next week's small group leader know so that they can follow up on the kids, or you just follow up with them 2 weeks later whenever you serve again. Do you need to just pray about something? Like, being able to move our kids towards Jesus is like, that's the thing, right? It's not just about like, hey, can they recite this? Can they tell me all the right answers? But it's like, we need to move our kids towards Jesus. So it may be like, what's the next step? Do you need to do something? Do you need to apologize to mom and dad? Do you need to like say sorry to your brother or to a friend? You may pray together. It may be sitting there practicing listening to the Holy Spirit. It's like, hey, you guys, what do you think God would say about this? And if all your kids are like, well, I don't even know like how God speaks to me. Like you can take that time to be like, hey, listen, like I believe the Holy Spirit still speaks to us today. So let's just take like, here's what it looks like for the Holy Spirit to talk to us. Listen, we're going to just take a minute and practice and see if anything happens. And by the way, guys, it's okay if nothing happens. Like you're just learning, it's coming like, so it may be just like, hey, we're just going to practice like learning what it means to listen to the Holy Spirit. Or, hey, we're just going to learn what it looks like to look up a verse in the Bible. Or you may just get an opportunity to say something meaningful, or encourage a kid in a way that maybe he's never heard. Maybe he's been told all along, like, hey, you're horrible, you're not smart, da da da. And you get the opportunity to say, man, like, that was a really wise answer that you just gave. Like, you may not know that he's been told like these things, but like your opportunity to like say something encouraging, like, and to like even point out like, hey, like that sounds like the Lord in you, or like it sounds like Jesus is like doing something in you. Like to be able to like move our kids towards Jesus and encourage them is like the best, is what we want to do, right? It's not about us. It's not about can they recite these things. There are certain obviously disciplines that are important, but like we want to move our kids towards Jesus. So those are just some things to think about how to have a great conversation with kids. How do you connect with our kids well? So just to remember, the 5 overall tips are: number 1, come prepared. Number 2, connect the kids with you and with others. Number 3 is to really get to know our kids. And then number 4, then we finally get to engage them in the truth about Jesus. And then last but not least is we want to actually help the kids move towards Jesus, right? So it's not just like, okay, I know the truth, but it's like, actually, we're going to move towards Jesus in this moment. So thank you so much for watching this video. There may be a short little quiz afterwards just to help you kind of like remember, like, hey, what did we talk about? Or just some way to feedback to your coordinator that you watched this. But thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this. And I just, if at any time you guys want to drop me an email, bell@milehighvineyard.org, I just would love to know how it's going. If there's something about this video that you're like, oh man, I never thought about that, I'm going to try that on Sunday. Or if even it's like, hey, I tried this and it worked really well. I just really, really, really would love to just hear any feedback you have. So thank you guys so much. And I hope you guys have a great day.